high profit, and if they have a bad year, then the business isn't there the next year. And so it's more than just capacity within a field. It could be whole businesses disappear.
Professor Jim Monaghan. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The studio manager is Ilse Laderman. With the producer in Bristol is Heather Simons.
The Today programme is next, but first let's take a look ahead to later on this evening.
I'm Helen Lewis, and I have a question for you. What connects nightmarish neighbourhood phone chats, Russian propaganda, and a woman who married a chatbot? Well, they're all stories that demonstrate just how much instant messaging has changed the world. It's transformed how we date, how we vote, how we argue, and how we fight wars. So join me as I journey deep inside our phones and computers to uncover stories as big as the invasion of Ukraine, as intimate as falling in love over text. Helen Lewis has left the chat. Continues on Wednesday mornings at 9:30 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
And this is BBC Radio 4.
It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 17th of April. Good morning. This is Today with Martha Carney and Justin Webb.
The headlines this morning. The Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron is in Israel amid rising tensions in the Middle East after Iran's unprecedented missile and drone strike at the weekend. Rishi Sunak's plan to phase out smoking has cleared its first Commons hurdle, but a vote last night highlighted divisions in the Conservative Party. Also in today's programme, a new drama about the American novelist Truman Capote.
This is what a writer does. It's bloody and sharp and real.
We stand and destroy them.
Oh, I'm in her.
We'll speak live to the actor Tom Hollander, who's playing Capote under attack by the socialite swans. And
Sweet for my sweet, and sugar for my honey. Your first kiss thrills me so.
they may have a combined age of almost 300 years, but the Searchers are out of retirement and back on tour. David Silito here's why. The BBC News is read by Alan Smith.
It's just been announced that the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has arrived in Israel as world leaders continue to urge restraint after Iran's missile and drone attack at the weekend. Yesterday, Rishi Sunak warned the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against further significant escalation. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landale has just sent this report from Israel.
Britain and other Western powers are united in urging restraint on Israel after Iran's unprecedented missile and drone attack. Lord Cameron is one of several foreign ministers dispatched to deliver that message on the ground. He's expected to meet Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Herzog, and his counterpart Israel Katz. And he's likely to echo what Rishi Sunak said in a telephone call with Mr. Netanyahu last night. The Prime Minister stressed that significant escalation was in no one's interest and would only deepen insecurity in the Middle East. This was a moment, he said, for calm heads to prevail. The Prime Minister also told Mr. Netanyahu he wanted to see a massive step change to flood Gaza with vital supplies of humanitarian assistance.
The UN is to launch a multi-billion-pound appeal to provide aid to the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank. Earlier, the organisation called for everyone involved to address an increasingly acute human rights and humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Andrea De Domenico is the head of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Palestinian territories.
The entire humanitarian community will appeal for 2.8 billion to support the 3 million people identified across West Bank and Gaza. Of course, 90% of it is for Gaza, and in fact, the original request was for 4 billion, but considering the limited ability to deliver, we have really focused on the highest priority.
The Health Secretary Victoria Atkins has described a vote by MPs backing plans to phase out smoking as an historic milestone. Rishi Sunak's policy, which would make it illegal for anyone in the UK born after 2009 to ever smoke, comfortably cleared its first Commons hurdle last night. But divisions in his party have laid bare, with 57 Conservatives voting against the plans. Our political correspondent Ian Watson reports.
Rishi Sunak gave his Conservative MPs a free vote in his smoking policy to ensure there was no form of rebellion. Nearly 60 of them voted against the plan. More than 100 didn't vote at all. The Business and Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch was the only cabinet minister to vote against, raising concerns about enforcement. While the leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt, actively abstained. The former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, made the unfiltered ideological argument that the measure was quite simply unconservative. But there were impassioned speeches from Conservative supporters of the measure too. The Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, said that thousands of young people could be spared an early death.
Paedophiles convicted of the most serious offences could lose parental rights over their own children after an amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill that has the support of the Lord Chancellor. It was tabled by the senior Labour MP Harriet Harman after she heard the report from this morning. A BBC investigation has found that Russia lost nearly a quarter more troops in the second year of the war in Ukraine compared with the first. BBC News Russian has verified the identities of more than 50,000 Russian fighters killed during the conflict. Olga Evshina sent this report.
For 2 years we have conditioned the expansion of military graveyards, more than 70 locations across Russia. By cross-checking thousands of names on headstones against local and social media reports, we have identified more than 50,000 Russian fighters killed in Ukraine. This figure is 8 times higher than Moscow has acknowledged. Our data shows that Russia lost 23% more troops in the second year of its invasion compared to the first.
With just 100 days until the start of the Olympic Games in Paris, the president of the organising committee says he's very satisfied with preparations for the event. In an exclusive interview, Tony Estanguet told the BBC that there would be an unprecedented security operation because of mounting concerns about safety. From Paris, here's our sports editor Dan Rowe.
With almost 8 million tickets already sold for the Paris Games, 250,000 more will go on sale today to mark the start of its final countdown. Although there are concerns about swimming events in the River Seine due to pollution, organisers are promising a sustainable event that establishes a new model for the Olympics. But amid geopolitical tensions and in a country that has suffered from terrorism, safety concerns hang over preparations. This week, the French President Emmanuel Macron admitted the opening ceremony, due to take place along the River Seine in a first for the Games, may have to be moved if the threat is deemed too high.
That report was from Dan Rowe.
Thank you. 6 minutes past 6. Goodness only knows what the weather has in store for us today. We've seen quite a range, haven't we, in recent times. Chris Fawkes is at the BBC Weather Centre. Morning, Chris.
Indeed we have, Justin. And, well, today we're looking at a chilly day overall. Certainly a cold start to the morning with temperatures down into low single figures. There will be some sunny spells around today, but we also have some patches of rain in the forecast. So let's delve into the details. Across England and Wales, at the moment, we've got quite widespread showers affecting the Midlands, East Anglia and across Wales too. They're going to be pushing into southern counties of England this morning. Otherwise, there should be some sunny spells around, but I think as we go into the afternoon, we'll see some further showers break out widely across northern England and some further downpours working into parts of East Anglia and eastern areas of England. At the same time, for western parts of Wales and southwest England, thicker clouds going to move in as we go through the afternoon, with outbreaks of rain starting to develop here. Temperatures below average, 10 to 12 degrees. Now for Northern Ireland, we're looking at some showers at the moment, but more general outbreaks of rain are going to move through for a time through the course of today. Most of the rain's not going to be particularly heavy, temperature around 10 degrees Celsius here. And finally, the forecast for Scotland, we've got some rain pushing into northeastern areas, a bit of rain for the Hebrides, otherwise a bright start to the day. But as we go through the day, there will be some showers breaking out, particularly across southern and eastern parts of Scotland, with temperatures here around 10 degrees Celsius. That's the latest weather.
Thanks very much indeed, Chris. The time now is 7 minutes past 6. We can have our first look at the day's papers, and the Times reports that police are looking into several allegations against Labour's deputy leader Angela Rayner, and not just the accusation she broke electoral law, which she denies. According to the paper, the Greater Manchester Police Chief Constable Stephen Watson told the local radio yesterday that there are a number of assertions knocking about and that police were going to get to the bottom of what happened. At least a dozen officers are said to be investigating Ms Rayner and looking at tax matters and other issues. Ms Rayner said that she'll step down if she's broken the law, but after taking tax and legal advice was confident she'd done nothing wrong. The paper suggests the issue is certain to overshadow next month's local elections.
The main story of the Telegraph is the smoking ban, honing in on the fact that nearly half of Conservative MPs failed to support it in Parliament. It notes that MPs were given a free vote on the tobacco and vapes bills, so the 59 who actually voted against it weren't officially classed as rebels, but it says a number of them will be seen as an indicator of dissatisfaction with Rishi Sunak's plans and a hint of a direction of travel under a future party leader. The Guardian too, the vote exposed deep Tory divisions because so many MPs voted against the bill. It suggests that Rishi Sunak had suffered a blow to his authority. Sig-free generation is the Mirror's headline. It says Britain now faces a smoke-free future after MPs voted for what is in effect a ban on smoking for today's youngsters. Inside, it argues that the move could be the most significant health initiative of our era.
Victory for the bravest head teacher in Britain is the Daily Mail's headline, referring to the High Court victory for the Michaela Community School in Brent, whose ban on prayer rituals had been challenged by a Muslim pupil. The paper calls the decision in the school's favour a landmark court ruling. For the Daily Express, it was a victory for secular education. No one, the paper argues, should be able to demand their religion is treated exceptionally in a secular school.
The front page of the Daily Telegraph is dominated by a picture of Nigel Farage in Brussels, where police tried to shut down the National Conservatism Conference while he was speaking yesterday. Legal papers seen by the Telegraph suggested that speeches at the conference could cause offence and public disorder. Writing in the paper, Mr. Farage describes what he calls the monstrous reaction to the event as an updated form of Soviet communism, allowing no other view. The paper says shutting down meetings taking an opposing view is straight out of Putin's playbook.
And the Financial Times carries a warning from the chair of the US Federal Reserve that inflation could take longer to bring down in America than previously thought and delay possible interest rate cuts. Jay Powell said he wanted greater confidence that inflation was moving sustainably towards the bank's 2% target from its current rate of 3.5%.
The time, 6:10.
Lord Cameron, David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, has just landed in Israel. We can talk to James Landell, our diplomatic correspondent, who's in Jerusalem. Morning, James. And obviously, given the drone attacks by Iran on Israel at the weekend, there's a huge amount of interest in this visit.
Oh, absolutely. I think he's one of there are other foreign ministers in town as well. Essentially, here on the ground to deliver a message that their prime ministers and presidents have delivered themselves in recent days, and that is one of restraint. The Foreign Secretary is likely to echo what the Prime Minister said in his call with Benjamin Netanyahu last night, basically saying that significant escalation was in no one's interest and that would only deepen insecurity in the Middle East, the call for calm heads. But I think as well as that, I think Lord Cameron will also continue to press Israel to get more aid, humanitarian assistance into Gaza, something that has been, the attention has been moved away from that because of the attack by Iran. And I think also the Foreign Secretary will probably try to get some of the messaging, some of the conversations back on those talks, attempting to find a ceasefire in Gaza and try to put a little bit of pressure back on Hamas as well.
And those subjects will continue, won't they, when he travels to the meeting of G7 ministers in Italy?
Yeah, what's really interesting about this is that Israel yesterday, a lot of the messaging was trying to internationalise the conflict with Iran. Several of their spokespeople and members of the war cabinet, including Benny Gantz and others, were saying things like this is not just a conflict between Israel and Iran, this is a regional conflict, this is a world conflict. And I think, in other words, they're trying to operationalise and use the support and sympathy that Israel got as a result of the attack to try and build a little bit of a coalition after many, many months when Israel's been pretty isolated because of the way it's been prosecuting its war in Gaza. And I think the foreign ministers this afternoon in Italy are going to try and reinforce that by hopefully agreeing some more plans about further sanctions on Iran, specifically perhaps about interrupting supply chains that allow Iran to build drones and build missiles such as they used against Israel at the weekend.
James Landell in Jerusalem, thank you.
6:13. Children's doctors want to make smacking illegal in England and Northern Ireland. There are already bans in Scotland and Wales. Let's talk to Philippa Roxby, our health reporter. Who exactly is this, Philippa, and what do they want?
Yeah, it is the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. These are child health experts, and they would like children to be fully protected from physical assault, just like adults in England and Northern Ireland. And they talk about how there's a legal loophole at the moment. Parents can argue that they're reasonably punishing their child at home if they smack or slap them, and they want that loophole closed. And they also point to the health effects on children of being punished over a long time at home. Poorer mental health, they're twice as likely to have that escalate into physical abuse, and their impacts on their behaviour as well, and their longer term prospects, and they'd like that changed.
What does the government in Westminster say?
Yeah, they are not in favour. There have been several attempts to try and overturn this law, and they say that current laws are already in place to protect children. They say any form of violence towards a child is unacceptable, but it's also a parent's responsibility to discipline their children, and so there are no plans to change the law on smacking in England at the moment.
Do we know what Labour think of it? I mean, given the closeness of the election and the chance at least that Labour will win, etc., do we know how this is likely to go?
Not at the moment, but the child health experts are saying they would like all political parties to include some form of law change in their election manifestos. So we'll wait and see if anybody takes this up. But it's interesting that Scotland and Wales have already moved ahead on this in the last few years. It's too early to know the impact of those law changes there, but many other countries have also brought in similar laws to ban smacking, and we've seen quite a large reduction in reports of children hit at home.
Philippa Roxby, thank you.
Time now is 6:15. The Governor of the Bank of England has said that the UK could take a different path on interest rates in the United States. Sean Paddington's got more on that. Morning, Sean.
Hi, Martha. Yeah, important one, this, because we've heard at this time plenty of querying about whether the Bank of England will wait until rates are cut over in the United States before any action here. Now, this week we're hearing lots of chat from various policymakers in Washington over in the United States, including from the governor of our own central bank, Andrew Bailey, who last night was talking about, his words, the dynamics for inflation rather different now between Europe and the United States. We want to talk about how that could lead to a different approach on rates. I've got Simon French with me, Chief Economist at Panmure Gordon & Co. Morning, Simon.
Good morning.
Simon, when I see you...
The appropriate path for interest rates is probably different in the United States, where they're seeing evidence of demand-driven inflation, versus in Europe and in the UK, where it is much more of a supply issue. Andrew Bailey is also correct that we expect unemployment to undershoot the inflation target through the summer as those big energy costs that we saw in the last couple of years start to leave the measure, and therefore potential different path to the Global Reserve Bank, the Federal Reserve, is possible. The slight fly in the ointment, or perhaps two flies in the ointment. One, that Andrew Bailey is just one of 9 members on the committee making this decision, and at least 3 others have made some pretty different statements, or hawkish statements, thinking it'll be quite a while before interest rates come. The other thing, of course, is that inflation potentially ticks up later in the year back above 2%, making it difficult when you're trying to set interest rates on a 12-month, 18-month horizon.
And what about the concern, which you've heard repeatedly on this programme, about if the UK decides to cut rates before the United States does, then the currency implications there, can that have a big impact?
Yeah, this is what we would describe as second-order effects. If you weaken the currency because the yields available in the United States are more attractive than the UK, therefore pushing what is known as hot flows of money into the United States economy and out of the UK, that potentially weakens sterling, the pound. If that then makes imports more expensive, then again do we risk having a pickup in imported-driven inflation, in particular things like food and energy, where the UK is reliant on imports. If the terms of those imports deteriorate, then you potentially trigger a second inflationary wave.
So that's what we're looking at here in the UK. Let's cross to somebody keeping a closer eye on events in the United States. Ruth Fox-Blader is a venture capital investor, general partner of the firm Fox Capital as well, based in New York. Morning, Ruth.
Good morning.
Morning our time anyway, at least. Thanks for joining us. Can you lay out then what's changed in the United States for these warnings from your own sort of boss of your central bank, Jay Powell, saying it's likely to take longer than expected for inflation to get to that 2% target that you have in the US?
Yeah, we're consistently seeing the economic data show that wages are continuing to grow. Unemployment is pretty stable, and actually, joblessness is not as high as economists would like to see inflation getting under control.
Right, joblessness not as high as people would like is always an interesting one for many workers to hear, isn't it? But that filters through, doesn't it? I mean, in your world of venture capitalism, where you're looking to put money into businesses where you might expect them to grow a bit faster than average startup businesses as well. There have been reports out this morning from KPMG, the accountants at KPMG, showing that kind of money and investment has fallen to its lowest level in 5 years. So are people starting to put less money into businesses because these interest rates are so high and for so long?
Yeah, interest rates definitely have an impact. This venture capital market correction is definitely linked to central banks and the fact that interest rates are high and they look like there's a strong possibility that there will be higher for longer. This means that there are just lower risk ways to find return on investment. And then that's also why the KPMG report shows that venture capital funds are raising less capital right now. We had a very, very frothy venture capital market, and the number one thing that these KPMG numbers are telling us is that right now investors are cautious.
Right, so investors are cautious, and I just wondered when I was looking through that report, it sort of particularly flags, global report, but flags at the top that it sees the UK as having had a slow start to the year. Do you notice any difference between confidence or activity in the UK in terms of investment compared to the United States, Europe?
Yes, I think during periods like this, it's normal for investors to retrench, and that's sort of geographically and thematically. Most venture capital in the world has been raised in the US, so it's normal to kind of stay in your home market when there is a correction. And also thematically, what we saw, and this is the usual contradictions of venture capital, while overall number of funding rounds have gone down, we're still seeing some really big mega rounds, and those rounds are happening in themes that people like: artificial intelligence, health, clean tech. And so, it's again, this is a super important part of the economy. It's the innovation economy. These exuberant markets are great places to exit venture-backed businesses.
Right.
And so, we see that there's less investment, there is this correction, but it really might be actually quite healthy.
Ruth, thank you. Ruth Fox-Blader there, the venture capital investor of the firm Fox Capital, based in New York. Let's have a look now. Renewables sector, because today Renewables UK, which represents many in that sector, alongside the government, releasing what they're calling an industrial growth plan for the offshore wind industry. Dan McGrail is Chief Executive of Renewables UK. Morning, Dan.
Morning, Sean.
This is, an issue we speak about a lot. How are we going to build for our energy needs in the future? What are you saying today that we haven't heard already?
Well, what we're announcing today is an important solution to the strategy of the offshore wind sector. We've quietly become a really important part of the energy mix. Just on Monday this week, wind power was providing about 55% of our electricity. But what we're announcing today is a clear, decisive strategy about how we not only build the wind farms, but build the industrial backbone, which will secure the supply of all some of the key components. I think your previous contributors were highlighting the risks from inflation and global uncertainty. So building our domestic supply chain is a real crucial protection in that. And we want to also build very technology mission-orientated programs which will make sure that those industries that we build in the UK are globally competitive in the future.
Yeah.
And the plan focuses on 5 key areas, and we think by doing this we can deliver 25 billion of additional value for the UK over the next decade and an additional 10,000 jobs on top of what we would have already done.
A lot of desires and ambitions. I mean, there's key parts of the whole process, but before we end up building the offshore wind farms as you've described, those supply chains. So the before on that, I see in the Financial Times today they refer to this report that the government has commissioned, which says supply chain constraints threaten our ability to meet renewable energy goals. As we are right now, are we constrained, and do you think they threaten our ability to meet those goals?
Well, that's a key reason why we commissioned this work and why we're setting about this plan.
But if the plan's not put into place, I just wonder, as you look at how the process is working right now, are we restrained?
Absolutely. What we've seen in the last few years since the energy crisis and the invasion of the Ukraine is significant ambition to move away from gas across the developed world, and really bold ambitions in the EU to move away from Russian gas. And as a consequence, people are putting in place new plans for renewable energy, and offshore wind in particular is a sort of a big backbone of large scalable renewable energy, but also accelerating the plans that they already had. And we did that in the UK as well when the government published its British Energy Security Strategy 2 years ago.
Dan,
really ratcheted up ambitions.
I just wanted to, sorry to interrupt you, Dan, but I did want to just get on to, the other side to having these wind farms as well, is you need to get the energy, onshore somehow. There's nothing in your growth plan about what would be needed to actually get the grid as it stands to cope with all of this, to get customers accessing that energy. I mean, isn't that a major part of giving businesses confidence to put money into this stuff?
Well, our plan is focused on developing the supply chain in the industries, and electrical technologies are a really key part of that. Cables in particular, we're going to see a massive increase in demand for cables over the next few years. What we haven't set about here is producing another report on grid, because there was a significant piece of work carried out by Nick Windsor, the government's electricity networks commissioner last year, and the government's got a huge programme of work in place to try and debottleneck that. And it is going to take time. There's undoubtedly, it's one of the big constraints to the energy transition. But what's really important is that we don't just respond by building those networks in the future, but we also build the factories and the technologies that will underpin it as well, which is what this plan is about.
Dan, thank you. Dan McGrail, Chief Executive of Renewables UK. Simon Fredge still with me. We've only got 20 seconds. Right. I wanted to mention the FTSE 100 having its worst day in 9 months yesterday. What was the mood like yesterday?
Largely response to that comment from the IMF that although growth will be higher, that probably means that interest rates around the world, their cuts will come later in the year, and that's just risk assets responding to that later cutting cycle. Thank you, Simon. Beautifully brief. So the FTSE 100 down 1.8% yesterday, 7,820 at the moment.
Sean, thank you. 26 minutes past 6 to this Sport O'Clock.
I've got 2.5 minutes. Plenty of goals in last night's Champions League quarter-final second leg fixtures. A stunning 4-1 win for Paris Saint-Germain at Barcelona, with Kylian Mbappe scoring twice. 6-4 PSG's aggregate victory. Mbappe may well be on his way to Real Madrid in the summer, but afterwards he said, "I dream of winning the Champions League with Paris." Borussia Dortmund were also behind after the first leg of their tie with Atletico Madrid, but won 4-2 last night in Germany. They go through to the semis 5-4 on aggregate. And so, to tonight's remaining quarter-finals: Manchester City versus Real Madrid, and Arsenal at Bayern Munich. Here's football correspondent John Murray.
In Manchester, the 14 times record winners of this trophy, Real Madrid, visit for a third successive season. And it was on their way to lifting it for the first time that Manchester City produced one of their greatest performances in sweeping aside Real 4-0 in the second leg of last season's semi-final. It's now 17 months since City were beaten in their home stadium. That resumes at 3-3. In Germany, it's 2-2 after the first leg. Arsenal, no longer the Premier League leaders, face the tall order of having to win through on Bayern Munich's home ground if they're to reach a Champions League semi-final for the first time for 15 years. And the winners of the two ties will meet in the semi-finals.
Domestic football summary as follows. Southampton may yet gain automatic promotion to the Premier League. They're 4 points behind second place Leicester in the Championship after beating Preston 3-0, 4 games to play. However, Portsmouth have secured promotion from League One to the Championship. 2 late goals against Barnsley delivered a 3-2 win that takes them back up as champions. Same story for Stockport County. They'll go up to League One as League Two champions after winning 5-2 at Notts County. Elsewhere, commitment to golf's PGA Tour this morning from Rory McIlroy. He says he'll play on the tour for, and I quote him, the rest of my career. There'd been rumours that he might make a move worth as much as $850 million to LIV Golf, but he said, I've never been offered a number from LIV and have never contemplated going to LIV. And Tony Estanguet, president of the Paris Olympics Organising Committee, has offered reassurances not only about the game's security, but also about the condition of the River Seine, venue for both the opening ceremony and the triathlon swimming event.
We are now very optimistic to have one of the best triathlon competitions ever during the Olympics, and also a fantastic legacy for the people to have the possibility to swim in the River Seine after the games during the summertime.
More on the games later, but right now the tips, of course. Newmarket 150, number 20 Abate, Cheltenham 205, number 12 Titan Discovery.
Thanks very much indeed, Rob.
On BBC iPlayer.
So we just want to get to the port, get on one of the ferries.
This is probably the biggest moment of the race so far.
Get our tickets now. Crash on.
Here we go. We've beaten them. Come on. This is it. Come on. Race Across the World is back.
I don't want to go home. I want more of this.
5 intrepid duos travel from Japan to Indonesia.
I know it's going to be hard. I want it to be easy.
With no phones, bank cards, or directions.
Mum, they're behind us.
Run! Brand new Race Across the World continues tonight on BBC iPlayer.
Time now, 6:30. You're listening to Today on Radio 4 with Martha Carney and Justin Webb, and Alan Smith has a summary of the news.
The Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron has arrived in Israel as world leaders continue to urge restraint after Iran's missile and drone attack at the weekend. Yesterday, Rishi Sunak warned the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against further significant escalation. The UN is launching a multi-billion-pound appeal to provide aid to the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank. The head of the UN's humanitarian agency for the Palestinian